it's the trail of techniques that was left behind from modeling processes. However, many people are still actively modeling, so it involves that as well. When I say modeling, the way that it came about was there were some people that were getting excellent results in their field. The first person that they modeled was Fritz Perls, because a gentleman named Richard Bandler, who was working with John Grinder. John Grinder was a linguistics professor, and Richard Bandler was working with him. And Richard Bandler was editing one of Fritz Perls' books. And as a result of that, he started to notice linguistic patterns that he was using, and so they started to map those. And then they got kind of interested in that and excited about that, and they knew about Virginia Satir, who was having excellent results doing family therapy, and so they went in and started modeling Virginia Satir. Now, the modeling of Virginia Satir went a little bit more in depth than it did with Fritz Perls, but nevertheless, the basic idea is that they originally started modeling the linguistic patterns that they were using. So what they found, just to give you a little piece of it, what they called that Virginia Satir was doing was the meta model. Meta model. Meta model is kind of interesting, but what was happening with her is families were showing up with problems, and she didn't like to treat just one, she wanted to treat everybody. But say, for instance, they would come in and they would say, "There's no communication." Well, now communication in that form is a nominalization. It's a verb that's being used as a noun. So what she would do is she would go down and she would say what specifically is not being communicated, and doesn't have to be a what next, but then she would say, and who specifically isn't communicating it, and she would break it all down until she would find out just exactly what the problem was. And what she found is that a lot of times, if it got really, really clear exactly what the problem was, a lot of times the problem just disappeared. But while everybody was up in here, this is Ebonics wasn't really around back then. But when everybody was in the idea that there was no communication and they were just mad about it, nothing was getting done. So what she did is she found a way to get more and more specific until she could come down to exactly what the problem wasn't anymore. Because when you get that specific, the problems just work themselves out. That's what she was finding. So they created this meta model, and they were just really thrilled with it. They're like, "Wow, this is great," because you can use it for a lot of things. So let's go on another topic. Let's say this is probably the easiest. Transportation. So now just to be clear about this, you can move up to, So for instance, it might not be that there's no communication. There might be no contact, or there might be. You might just go on up into who knows what level you would go up into. But so from transportation, you could go up into human enterprise, or you could go into the planet Earth or the space around it. I mean, I don't know where you could go, but you can also go down and you can get more and more specific. What's an example of transportation?
Bus.
Car, right? Car, bus.
Planes.
Plane.
Yeah, trains.
What was that?
Trains, automobiles.
Train. Okay, good. So this is the next level of that. So what's an example of? Well, let's not use bus because not many people probably know the parts of a bus or something. But let's talk about a car. So what car specifically? An example of cars. We can go with manufacturers, right?
Honda.
So we used to have GM, and we used to have Toyota.
You said Honda.
Yeah, well, Honda we'll probably still have for a little while. It's hard to say. But at any rate, so you see how that works. So now you have a Honda, maybe, all right, and what you got is a Civic. By the way, this is the way the U.S. Army sorts everything. Because you would be issued everything was issued like one each or two each. Like so, it would be boots, jump, black, two each or something like that, and it would say that on the box that you would get. So they would go to the boot section and all the boots would be there, and then they would go to the jump boots and all the jump boots would be there, and then they would go to the size, and then they would go. Anyway, so that's the way it would go. But anyway, so you can get all the way down to what? A screw, a particular screw, a fuse, and so it's a fuse, and then you got a 15 amp fuse, and you can just break it all the way down. Now the advantage to this is that you can also move laterally. So you can say, well, someone's having, and it gets a lot more obvious in a therapeutic setting. But say, for instance, someone's going on about this car or something like that. Well, you can make an example about a train. And you can say, well, trains, in a train situation, because they're talking about how their car is, uncomfortable or something like that, or whatever, they get distracted. And then you can say, well, in the trains, when they're running on the track, they have to have, a particular type of cushioning because the tracks are never level, and so the roads are more stable than the train tracks. Now, the reason that I'm saying that is it doesn't make any sense in this setting necessarily, but in a therapeutic setting, it can make a lot of sense. So if you take a problem and you change the context of the problem, sometimes it no longer looks like a problem. So there are two basic ways of using the meta model in this situation: is to change the context, meaning move laterally. Usually, so if they're talking about a particular problem with a particular thing, you chunk up, you move laterally, and you chunk back down into whatever it is that sets an example for what you're trying to say. Well, this is all very theoretical, and I'm not being very practical about it at all, but I'm not thinking of anything that this really applies to at the moment. And then the other thing is, what did I just say? Moving over lateral. Oh, context. Change the context of a situation, or you can change the content of the situation. So somebody can come over and they can go, well, blah, 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 my headlights aren't working. And you can say, well, because my fuse is blown, you can say, well, why don't you look for a spare fuse? So you're changing the content of the situation then, because you're saying that maybe there's a spare, they look for the spare, they can fix that. But if you change context, you're changing the parameters of the problem, and a lot of times you can blow out a problem if you can just change the parameters of it. And so that's what a lot of generalizations are used. Generalizations in a lot of ways become a problem in themselves because they don't take into account the specifics, the nuances of whatever it is that's going on. And in people's thought process, once they start saying, I can't this, or I don't like that, there's probably something about it that seems very difficult, or something about the situation that they really don't like. But a lot of times, if you just shift perspective, things look a lot easier, or they look a lot more desirable.